Austria's national football team is one of European football's most interesting stories, not because it has been constantly successful, but because its history rises and falls in dramatic waves. At different moments, Austria has been a genuine football power, a symbol of tactical innovation, a post-war contender, a team trapped in decades of frustration, and finally, a modern side trying to rebuild its identity. The team represents Austria in men's international football and is controlled by the Austrian Football Association, known as the FB. But to understand why this team matters, you have to look beyond recent tournaments. Austria's football story begins in the early 20th century, when Vienna was one of the great football centers of Europe and the game was spreading rapidly through the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Austrian Football Association was founded on March 18, 1904, while Austria was still part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. This timing matters because football in Austria did not develop in isolation. Vienna was a cosmopolitan city, full of clubs, coffeehouse culture, newspapers, and tactical debate. Football became more than a sport, it became part of urban identity. The national team grew from this environment, drawing on a technical and intelligent style associated especially with Viennese football. Rather than relying only on physical strength, Austrian football developed around movement, passing, positional play, and creativity. These early foundations would later make Austria one of the most admired teams in Europe, especially during the period that became known as the Age of the Wunderteam. The 1930s were the golden age of Austrian football. Under coach Hugo Meisel, Austria built a side so impressive that it became known as the Wunderteam, meaning the miracle team. This was not just a nickname based on a few lucky results. The Wunderteam was admired for its fluid style, technical quality, and tactical sophistication. At a time when international football was still developing its modern structure, Austria looked ahead of many rivals. Meisel's team emphasized passing combinations and intelligent movement, creating an attacking rhythm that could overwhelm opponents. The Wunderteam became a symbol of what Austrian football could be at its best: elegant, organized, creative, and ambitious. For a period, Austria was not a small football nation trying to survive, it was one of Europe's elite. Austria's strength in the 1930s was confirmed on major stages. At the 1934 FIFA World Cup, Austria finished fourth, a remarkable achievement in an era when the World Cup was still young but already extremely competitive. 2 years later, Austria won the silver medal at the 1936 Olympic Games. These results showed that the Wunderteam's reputation was backed by performance. Yet there was also a sense of unfinished business. Austria came close to the very top without capturing the ultimate prize. That makes the period both glorious and bittersweet. The team was remembered not only for what it won, but for what it represented: a football culture capable of competing with the strongest nations in the world through intelligence, technique, and style. Then came one of the most disruptive moments in Austrian football history. In 1938, the Anschluss annexed Austria into Nazi Germany. The consequences reached far beyond sport, but for the national team, the impact was immediate and devastating. The Austrian Football Association was dissolved, and Austrian players were forced into the German national team setup for the 1938 World Cup. This effectively ended the independent Austrian team at the very moment when its football reputation was still powerful. The Wunderteam era did not fade naturally through age or sporting decline, it was broken by political catastrophe. That interruption is a central reason Austria's football history feels so fragmented. A team that had helped shape European football suddenly lost its independent stage. After World War II, Austria re-established its national team, and the post-war years brought another major high point. The greatest achievement came at the 1954 FIFA World Cup, where Austria finished third. This remains one of the strongest World Cup performances in the country's history. It proved that Austrian football still had depth after years of political disruption and reconstruction. The 1954 team belonged to a different era from the Wunderteam, but it carried forward the idea that Austria could compete seriously on the world stage. Finishing third in a World Cup is not a minor footnote. It means surviving pressure, beating strong opponents, and showing that a national program has both quality and resilience. For Austria, it was a powerful post-war statement. Austria remained competitive through parts of the 1950s and 1960s, even if it did not always reach the same heights. One of the standout moments came in 1965, when Austria defeated England at Wembley Stadium. Wins at Wembley carried special meaning because England considered the stadium a symbolic home of football. For a continental European team to go there and win was a major achievement, especially in that period. It showed that Austria could still produce disciplined, technically capable sides that were dangerous against top opponents. But this era also revealed a growing problem: isolated great results were not always matched by consistent tournament qualification. Austria could still shock major teams, yet building sustained momentum became more difficult. The decades after the early post-war success were uneven. Austria failed to qualify for the FIFA World Cup during the 1960s and narrowly missed out on the 1974 tournament after a playoff against Sweden. These disappointments reflected how international football was becoming deeper and more competitive. More nations were organizing professionally, tactical systems were improving, and qualification became less forgiving. For Austria, the challenge was not simply producing talented players, but turning talent into consistent results across full campaigns. Missing tournaments also affects a national team's identity. Each absence creates distance from the global stage, reduces visibility, and can make a once proud football nation feel as if it is chasing its own past. Austria revived again in the late 1970s and early 1980s. The team reached the second round of both the 1978 and 1982 FIFA World Cups, reappearing as a serious international competitor. The most famous moment from this period was the victory over West Germany in 1978. This match became iconic because West Germany was a major football power, and beating them carried enormous sporting weight. For Austria, it was more than just a result. It was a reminder that the national team could still produce historic performances against elite opposition. The revival did not restore Austria permanently to the level of the Wunderteam, but it gave supporters another era to remember with pride and proved the country still had a competitive football pulse. The 1990s and 2000s were much more difficult. One of the most painful symbols of this decline was Austria's defeat to the Faroe Islands during qualification for UEFA Euro 1992. Upsets happen in football, but some results become national trauma because they seem to reveal deeper problems. For Austria, that defeat stood as a warning sign that the team had slipped far from its historical reputation. The country did qualify for the 1998 FIFA World Cup, but the campaign ended in the group stage. That tournament became Austria's 7th World Cup appearance, and for many years, its last. After 1998, Austria entered a long absence from the World Cup, making the gap between historical memory and modern reality even wider. Austria's first appearance at the UEFA European Championship came in 2008, when it automatically qualified as co-host with Switzerland. This was an important milestone, but it also showed the difference between participation and real competitive progress. Austria was eliminated in the group stage, and because qualification came through hosting, the tournament did not fully prove that the team had rebuilt itself. Still, Euro 2008 mattered because it put Austria back into a major European football spotlight. It exposed the team to the demands of modern tournament football and reminded the public what international competition could feel like at home. Even disappointing tournaments can become part of a rebuilding process if they raise expectations and force structural improvement. The modern resurgence began to take clearer shape with successful qualification campaigns for Euro 2016, Euro 2020, and Euro 2024. This was significant because Austria was no longer simply appearing as a host or relying on memories of old glory. It was earning its place through qualification. Under current head coach Ralf Rangnick, Austria has developed a more modern identity, often associated with structure, pressing, intensity, and collective organization. Rangnick's influence matters because modern international football rewards teams that know exactly how they want to play. Austria may not have the biggest pool of global superstars, but a clear system can make a national team greater than the sum of its parts. That is the foundation of the current revival. Austria's qualification for the 2026 FIFA World Cup, after a 28-year absence from the tournament, gives this modern chapter extra weight. It connects the present to a long and complicated past, the brilliance of the Wunderteam, the rupture of 1938, the post-war high of 1954, the famous win over West Germany in 1978, the disappointments of the 1990s, and the slow climb back through European championships. Austria's football story is not a straight line from greatness to decline or from decline to rebirth. It is a cycle of identity, interruption, recovery, and reinvention. That is what makes the team fascinating. Austria is not just trying to qualify for tournaments, it is trying to prove that an old football culture can still matter in the modern game. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.